Psalm 30, which ends on a real note of joy, at least. It is a psalm that's said from coming out of profound trouble, though, and maybe that's part of what joy is as well. Listen for God's word. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up, and you did not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol, restored me to life from among those who have gone down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you, his faithful ones, and give thanks to God's holy name. For God's anger is but for a moment, but his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes in the morning. As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. By your favor, O Lord, you have established me as a strong mountain. You hid your face, and I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I cried, and I made to the Lord a supplication. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be gracious to me. O Lord, be my helper. For you have turned my mourning into dancing, and you have taken off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, so that my soul may praise you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. So ends our reading. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Our song that we'll have sung by Kate as a solo, it reflects a song of Mary, who is the person that we associate with joy on this third Sunday of Advent. Enjoy.
Many moonless nights.
Kate and Zach for hearing that song. And now I'm going to read the original of Mary's songs, which comes to us from Luke chapter 1, starting at verse 39. Listen for God's word. In those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. Elizabeth was Mary's cousin. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord has come to me? For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leaped for joy. And blessed is she who has believed that there will be fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord." And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. And he has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imaginations of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich empty away. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." And Mary remained with Elizabeth for about 3 months and then returned to her home. So ends reading the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, actually, I had a kind of another moment in mind when I think about joy, and that, forgive me, it was when the Chicago Cubs won the 2016 World Series, ending a 100-year drought between championships. And I see Kate over here, who is from Chicago, giving me a thumbs up. And there was joy in Mudville, I mean, in the Windy City. Even here in Purcellville, like Kate, and I know a few others of you who remember that day with great fondness. Now, I have to say that's a little bit odd for me because I was born in Peoria, Illinois, not Chicago, and my family rooted for the St. Louis Cardinals, which are the rivals to the Cubs, which, made for me. And I actually remember that season well when the Nats went to play against the Cubs early in the season. Bryce Harper was on a real hot streak, and he was hitting home runs every other bat at the plate. And so the Cubs purposely walked him every time he got up, and the strategy worked. And they had a swagger that was on the border of arrogance. And so I was rooting for the Indians. But there was some way in which that joy for those Chicago fans couldn't be denied. It was one that should be appreciated, even if you weren't a Chicago Cub fans, because it was such a profound joy that they were feeling. Grown men and women wept, reported the Chicago Tribune. Fireworks lit up in the sky, both in the city and the suburbs. School-aged children gathered on sidewalks after their bedtime to cheer honking cars that went by. And this is what a 108-year-old dream finally realized looks like, said the paper. It was, said one of the fans speaking universally for all fellow Chicagoans, the greatest night of my life. And not only that, but it was contagious. In fact, one of the interesting things that happened after all this was over is that some of the Cub players would say what they experienced. They said, everywhere I go, people would come up to me and say, tell me some story about their late father or grandfather, mother or grandmother, brother, sister, who was the biggest of all Chicago Cub fans. And the World Series title would have meant so much to them, the players were told. And then 2 words would follow. Thank you. The joy was expressed with a lot of gratitude, Coach Joe Madden said. For the most part, they didn't want an autograph or a picture. What they wanted was just to shake your hand and say, thank you. Now, I know that's a lot of sports and baseball and all that kind of stuff for us to have at the beginning of the sermon. That's in a day in which we talk about Mary, of all things. But I think there's something in that story that talks about what joy is and actually relates to Mary. It is something that is heightened if there is kind of long suffering that comes before it. It is something that comes as a gift that can't just be bought and sold. It's something beyond. It's like the players not getting, and other people not getting the autograph. They just want to say thank you. That's the profound nature of the joy that they were feeling. And it's also something that's to be shared. Not even just with the tribe of the Cub fans, but beyond, even to St. Louis Cardinal or Washington Nationals fans as well. That's kind of what's going on also in Mary's Magnificat, the song that we read from Luke chapter 1. William James Jennings says he thinks he knows what joy is. In its essence, it's an act of resistance against despair and all its forces. I think that's really a helpful definition of what joy is. Not just something of a momentary feeling, but it's an act of resistance against despair and all. Because that means that joy isn't just coming to you from somewhere else, but it's also part of who we are in our own agency and own way of participating in that joy. And by suggesting that as an understanding of the joy, 3 points could be made about that. First of all, that joy does come, especially in a delightful way, when it is following long suffering. Joy is almost sweetened by the postponement and the resilience it takes to wait for it, right? But second, it also comes as this profound gift. No matter our efforts to faithfully wait for it, it still comes as a gift. We can't manufacture it. We can't buy it. In fact, that's kind of, in some sense, what our commercial way of living seems to kind of perpetuate all the time. It's like, you don't have enough joy, so let me sell you something that will give it. And usually, as much as we might enjoy something like that for a brief time, it isn't satisfying in the long run. It isn't as profound as a joy that just ends up saying, thank you. And finally, joy isn't something that you just keep to yourself. It almost, as personal as it is, it almost compels you to connect with others, to share that joy. It even connects, calls you to connect with others who may not be in your group. And we see all this in Mary's song. For instance, although she is bearing witness to the coming of the Christ child, she is that person who has been waiting so long and kind of giving a testimony of a people that has waited so long for this day. And look at the profound historical circumstances in which it takes place. Israel, and where Mary lives in Nazareth, is occupied by a Roman army, a foreign army. And they are impoverishing those who live in rural places like Nazareth, making people who farm the land the most hungry people that there are. Because all of the taxes are taking away from them what they might be able to have to sustain their families. And their children don't have a place on the land anymore and actually resort to going into the hills and becoming robbers, preying on people who are traveling through those hills. And these also become the zealots who will bring rebellion against Rome, and some 70 years later will have kind of ended up in Jerusalem, when the Roman armies bring what may be called the first Holocaust of the Jewish people, because there's this kind of sense of overwhelming oppression that is there. And so Mary is saying her song in the midst of this situation. And not only that historic situation, but also as one whose gender in her community, in her family, has told her she is second place. She's young, she's poor with daily hunger, she has the lowly status of a servant. And these pieces make, the kind of joy that she sings profound, because she has endured and is representative of people who have long suffering. For Mary, she has been able to make productive use of her pain and suffering, not allowing them, in essence, to become the gods who rule her life or the life of her people. That's where she also has a great faith. But so also this joy is a gift. Elizabeth's baby leaps in her wombs at the sound of Mary's voice. And you can almost hear the trees of the field clap their hands, and the hills burst forth into song. And heaven and nature are singing, joy to the world, the Lord is come, when Elizabeth and Mary meet. And as much as they've been kind of waiting and see the horizon of this new thing that is coming, and it is such a kind of a prize for their endurance, nevertheless, it is especially a profound gift. They've been spending all their energy to survive, but they're just glad that, kind of what has come to them, that they who live on what's thrown away, in fact, they're themselves thrown away. Sometimes people live on what other people discard and find in those things great sense of treasure. And Mary and Elizabeth and all the people like them are also finding that sense of treasure. I kind of wonder how they would sustain themselves a little bit in that sense of gift. Can you imagine Elizabeth and Mary in the kitchen together working, or maybe going down to the well and fetching the water that they could wash their clothes in or bring home for drinking or bathing and the like? And the kind of stories they would tell one another in the midst of that kind of situation. They probably joked around about it. They probably found some ways to have a sense of kind of deflection, a profound indirection that would kind of help them have a space where they weren't just oppressed by those things. I think that's still true today. And so many of us, if we're in middle school, for instance, one of the key elements of being in middle school to survive is just being able to tell a joke, maybe on yourself, maybe on somebody else, but it kind of lifts you up. And church is actually like that in a certain sense too. It is a place where we come, and even though we don't expect it, things are better because we came and we were here. At the heart of this, and the giftedness of joy is also communal. This is a Pentecost joy. I know that's the wrong season, but really it is. Because what Pentecost is about is that dreams of power give way to the speaking, to the listening of the speaking of languages of somebody else. Your own sense of wanting to conquer is transformed by the way you can interact with others and value them. That's happening here with Mary too. And you can hear that in the sense of the kind of redemption that's going on for the people who have been under the thumb. But you also even hear it, I think, in how she talks about those who, are thrown off the top. The rich are sent empty away, it says. And yet I don't think, and maybe it's because I have much compared to what Mary had or so many people have. But nevertheless, it's not like they're annihilated. They're still in the song. They're still there to maybe learn lessons that they had not learned before, receive joy that they had not been able before to receive, and still be connected to Mary, so that her joy could reach even to these. Even if you're a Cardinals or a Nats fan, somehow, maybe you can be joyful that the Cubs won after 108 years. I think we need that kind of joy here these days, now that we're in Advent, yes, indeed, but also especially this year, which has been so difficult, staying apart from one another, people losing jobs, people on the front lines, risking their health, people actually offering themselves so they've died in caring for others. All those things debilitate and break us apart. And I think we need that lesson of joy here in this situation. Yes, indeed, it asks for that kind of long suffering and resilience, but it still holds a promise of fulfillment. And we need to know, I think, that joy isn't just dependent on us. It is a gift that comes. And I think so many times we're working so hard, we're using all our energy to survive, and somehow we also need to make some kind of space for something coming to us from God. That actually is really what the Christmas story is about, is God making space in humanity for him to give the gift of this child. And for those of us who have children, like Sarah was saying in the video, it's just a profound gift that comes to us above and beyond what we can expect. And we are just amazed by that kind of gift and its profundity. And finally, there is that cause we need to stir up the sharing of this joy. I'm hopeful that our stream services may give you a way to not just hear a message about joy, but actually to feel like you're still connected. That in some ways, because you've been at worship, that there is still a promise that things are going to get better because we've been together. And I think church is like that. It's that kind of place, if we had a full sanctuary today, the third Sunday of Advent, and people came and going, I don't know what I'm going to expect this morning. I'm hassled and harassed by all the shopping and all the busyness of the season, and I've been arguing with Mr. So-and-so or Ms. such and such, and they're going to be there in the pew with me. But you go home and you go, wow, God also was there, and I feel somehow like things are going to get a little better. I hope that's coming across in some ways through these live stream things. But I also want to say, we have opportunities still to connect with one another. I know I called 3 women in the church on my walk yesterday and had really pleasant conversations with all 3 of them, learned some things going on in their life that gave me a reason to be praying for at least one of them going through difficulties with regard to health. And it was great to just reach out and connect. You got some time where you can say, I should call a friend I haven't seen for a while.